Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another gathering here of FCAN's webinar series. Today we're going to be discussing the very popular topic of FAFSA, and the framing of our conversation today will be FAFSA Reboot, powering up completion rates for 2024-2025. My name is Braulio Colon. I'm the Executive Director for the Florida College Access Network. And we have some great information that we want to share out with you today. We're bringing together some friends and some partners from the National College Attainment Network, our friends at the U.S. Department of Education, and there's a lot to discuss. And so excited to be able to put this together for you. And I hope that you leave here with some actionable next steps on how we can all be supporting our students and our families across Florida to assist with completing this very, very important form. As you know, education after high school has never been more important. I think we all understand that. And one of the biggest barriers to accessing education after high school is this perception that it's unaffordable. And we want to do everything we can to minimize that perception or eliminate it. And the FAFSA form is the most important first step in helping to deliver the data students and families need to understand that they certainly can afford it and that it's worth their while. So we're excited about the conversation today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our partner internal at FCAN, our network development and engagement lead, Dr. Kimberly Krupa.
Thank you so much, Braulio, and we're so excited to see everyone on this call. We just sent this out 48 hours ago and had over 100 folks registered. So obviously this is the topic of our moment, and we're so excited to bring on these experts to share what we can do to address these gaps for the class of 2024. So before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. We've received over 20 questions. We've segmented them and we will address a lot of them today. But if you have additional questions, please use the Q&A tool in the Zoom webinar platform. We would love to get your questions as we go and then address them after each content presentation and then at the end as we're able. For questions we can't get to, we'll do our best to address those in a follow-up blog that we plan to release in the next 24 to 48 hours. And that will be a key takeaways blog that captures all of the links and content shared today, as well as answers to questions that are both addressed and not addressed. Also share on social if you're able. Our mission at the Florida College Access Network is to lead the collaborative movement to ensure every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. Matching that is our vision of a Florida working together, where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. We do this through these core bucket areas. I was going to highlight all of these because they intersect closely with our FAFSA challenge as part of our College Ready Florida statewide initiatives that are led by my co-host, Adriana, who will be helping to facilitate the Q&A throughout today's webinar. But I did highlight these conditions, these 5 out of 7 conditions that closely intersect with the FAFSA situation that we're facing this year, but that we challenge our communities to rise to that occasion every year through our FAFSA challenge, intersecting with the conditions, opportunity for everyone, clear information and guidance, affordability, effective use of data through numerous data tools that one of our guests, Louisa, will walk us through today, and community collaboration to share and solve these problems together. So you are all here to hear some really rich content and also some expert advice and solutions. So let's get to that. I'm thrilled to hand over the mic first to Louisa Woodhouse, a policy associate with the National College Attainment Network, who will sort of set the stage for us from the national college perspective, showing us some great data on FAFSA completion rates, and then diving into some Florida trends before she pivots to some solutions with some great new social media communication assets. Then we'll shift to our partners at the U.S. Department of Education, led by Sheetal Shah, who is the Senior Advisor of Strategic Partnerships at the Office of the Secretary in the U.S. DOE. So we're excited to have these two panelists. And we at the back end at FCAN will be fielding your questions and making sure that we're monitoring the chat and rising questions to the top when we get to the Q&A of our agenda. So I will stop sharing, Louisa, and I'm happy to turn this over to you.
Thanks so much, Kim. I'm going to take a minute and go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can everyone see that all right?
Yes, looks great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I see we have 96 folks on the call, which is really incredible, especially given how quickly FCAN was able to put this together. We're really grateful for their partnership in this work and for all of your attention and action, given where we stand with FAFSA and FAFSA completion. So I'm going to start just very quickly with a brief overview of NCAN. We are the National College Attainment Network. We operate on principles and values very similar to those of FCAN, just on the national scale. We do work primarily with LCANs and with CBOs, as well as with several institutions of higher education and state agencies. Primarily, my role in this is on the policy team, but I am pinch hitting for Bill DeBond today, who's our data guy, our strategic director, and he is really the driving force behind much of the data that you'll see today. So I just want to give credit where it's due and recognition to Bill for his work in this area. So we're all here to talk about FAFSA. I want to set the stage quickly. I know Kim and Braulio both mentioned this, but just to ground us in why FAFSA completion is so critical. We know that there's a strong link between student FAFSA completion and immediate college enrollment out of high school. You can see here the classes 2016, 18, 2020, and 2022. And it's really evident, I think, from this graph how close a link there is. We know that when students are able to complete the FAFSA and receive the federal aid to which they're entitled, they do enroll in college right out of high school at much higher rates than otherwise. So that's what this is really about. And I think that's an important focus to keep in mind. Another reason that FAFSA completion rates are so critical has to do with college enrollment. So a lot of the time we see that FAFSA completion rates can be predictive of college enrollment in the fall. Looking at this chart, we have data from several previous graduating classes, their national FAFSA completion rates, and then the year-over-year FAFSA percent completion change, as well as the enrollment rates. And what we see here is that 2019, 2020, and 21 were most obviously affected by the COVID pandemic. We saw both the FAFSA completion rates going down and the national enrollment rates go down. In 2022, there was a bit of a rebound, which was excellent. We saw those rates, both enrollment and FAFSA completion, go up. In 2023, we saw that pattern continue. We don't actually have the enrollment data yet. It has yet to be released, but we expect that that will follow the increase in FAFSA completion. And in 2024, which is what brings us here today, we see that the national FAFSA completion rate is significantly lower. The year-over-year percent change has significantly dropped. And we're really concerned about what this means for enrollment in the fall. So how is the class of 2024 doing? I'm going to dive into some of NCAN's FAFSA tracker data. I wanted to first give a little context. So this is a resource that is put together by Bill. It uses publicly available high school level FAFSA completion data, which you can further disaggregate into more local divisions at the high school level, at the district level. There are more statistics on the NCAN tracker than I can get to today, so I do want to flag that that's here if you're interested. So this is, I think, the most important here. We're seeing trends that we're not pleased with. We're not where we want to be. Currently, we know that the national FAFSA completion percentage for students is about 40%, compared to closer to 50% in a typical year, as we see with the class of 2023. On the right, we have the year-over-year percent change in FAFSA completions, which is essentially a measure of how much we are closing the completion gap. And we see that year over year, we're down 17.2%. I do want to point out that while those are not numbers that we're, happy about, and that there's a lot of work that can be done here, at NCAN, I think we've been sort of cautiously pleased to see how much steeper that line, has grown in recent weeks. That is a testament to all of the work that you are doing. It's also a testament to the form changes being functional and effective, and students are now able to file the FAFSA and complete the FAFSA in higher rates. So that is a trend that we really want to continue. We want to ensure that those continue to be steeper slopes in the right direction. And this chart demonstrates the completion rates for several of the previous classes. I think this is helpful context to understand the work that we need to do in the remaining couple weeks of the school year and then in the following months. So the blue line on the bottom represents student FAFSA completion for the class of 2024. I think this data runs through May either 3rd or 10th. I can get that later. And then on the top there, we see the trends for the earlier classes. So the class of 2023, though it's not marked on here, at June 30th, they had about 53% of students completing the FAFSA. That's this mark right up about here. And we are at 40% currently. So if we consider the fact that June 30th is what we typically think of as the end of the school year, it's a key date where many students will lose access to the support that they've had in schools. And we're trying to get that back up to that 53% rate. We have about 5.5, 6 weeks to do that, which means that on a weekly basis, we're going to be looking to capture about 2% of this student population each week. Quickly, this is a heat map for the year-over-year percent change. I think it's important to highlight because it is, pretty devastating, but I think it also should serve as fueling the fire for the work that we can do to really come back and close the gap. We know that there are resources available. We know that the form is functional for so many students now, and that it's, there's still time left for students to fill this out. So as we can see in Florida down here, the year-over-year percent change is about 22.5. So Florida is about 22.5% behind where the state would typically be when it comes to FAFSA completions. To put this in a national perspective, that's one of, I think, 5th lowest in the country. So that is really your charge here today, is to kind of recoup some of that and to get back on track there. To reiterate, we see that, pretty much every state, I think every state in the country has fallen behind, has been on the up, trying to make progress towards where they would like to be typically. Florida's is about 22.5% behind. The national year-over-year lag is 17.2%. So we do see that Florida students have been unable to complete the FAFSA at a rate lower than those nationally. And again, this is the FAFSA completion rate, not the year-over-year percent. But we see a similar trend here. 27.1% of Florida students have been able to complete a FAFSA for the class of 2024. I believe that that is in the top or the lowest 5. I want to say it's number 3. So there's plenty of work to be done, but there are resources to help. Again, there's still time left, and we really want to make sure that we're channeling all of our efforts to close that gap. And this just adds, I think, to the national context. We see that some of the states that have done relatively well, Tennessee, Louisiana, Illinois, Texas, and DC, which we know is not officially a state, but has performed well. We know that, many of those states, excluding DC, are universal FAFSA states. So there are policies and practices in place that have sort of helped them to reach those higher levels. We also see the year-over-year percent change in Indiana, North Dakota, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Ohio has been, they've performed relatively better than others. So again, I think this data is really important for folks to see and to understand, but I want it to be motivating rather than discouraging. I think it's really important that we use this moment to harness the resources that we have to make progress there. I think I'm going to pause here just to see if anyone has a couple data questions, or can really correct me if I'm wrong. Should I wait until the end?
Why don't we wait until the end?
Okay. If you have questions, hold on to them. I'd love to get to them later, and we'll continue. So as I go on, I've just presented a lot of data. I know that it's maybe not the most encouraging, and this is where I want to kind of shift the trajectory and start thinking about what we can do to get students back on track. I think if anyone has seen any NCAN publications or heard any of our talking points, seen us on the news recently, that this is something that we feel really strongly about, that it's so important now that that is what we are focused on, and that students are able to fill out the form, that they know that it is simpler, that the errors that they may have experienced previously have been resolved for the most part, and that there's still money that they could receive to pay for college. So with that, I want to talk briefly about our Do the FAFSA campaign. We, a couple weeks ago, I believe, launched a digital media campaign trying to reach students to let them know that FAFSA is functional, that it will help them pay for college, and that it's really important that they are able to access the form and fill it out. So as I mentioned, this is a national effort. It is the goal of this campaign is to help the class of 2024 get back on track to the same FAFSA completion rate or higher, ideally, than the class of 2023, to get back on that upward trend of what we've seen in previous years when it comes to increasing FAFSA completion and college enrollment. And again, this is specifically targeted to young people who are lower income. So we're looking at household incomes of $60,000 or less, and a focus on students of color. We have communications in Spanish and English. This is an example of some of our messaging. We're doing paid advertising on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Snapchat. We've also contracted a couple of influencers, and We have our social press kit available on the website at ncan.org/do-the-FAFSA. I can drop that link in the chat in a little bit. And, you know, we haven't branded this. We really want it to be available for public use. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to visit the site and use the resources there. There's power in numbers. You know, we feel really strongly that students understand that time is not, you know, there's still time to complete the form and to receive the money that they need to pay for school. This campaign is expected to run now through August, so it's focused on summer, which is traditionally a time that we are focusing our efforts on preventing summer melt. This year, it's a little bit more of a summer build. And our messaging is nothing super complicated, focusing on, as I've said, it's not too late to fill out the form. Students who fill out the form, for the most part, will get money. The changes have made it simpler. It can take as little as 10 minutes, and more students, especially those from low-income backgrounds, will qualify for financial aid than have in previous years. So I think that's a really critical piece. We recognize that there are still students who are facing difficulties, and we're doing our best to make sure that those are addressed. And to date, we're really proud and grateful that we've been able to raise nearly $2 million of our $4 million goal. I know many of the folks on this call are LCANs and smaller organizations, so this might not be the right ask, but if there are folks who are looking to support financially, we would love to partner with you. And if you have any questions, I can connect you with Elizabeth Morgan. I believe that is my last slide. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And again, I just want to reiterate that the focus now is on what can be done. And I know we're extremely grateful to the Department of Education for all the work that they have done, especially with the recent funding being made available in awards to NCAN members and other members doing similar work. So to continue the trajectory of, you know, upward motion and what we can do now, I'm going to pass it to Sital to continue.
Thank you, Louisa. And I want to acknowledge my two other colleagues who are on the webinar with us, Monica Logothetis and John Garcia. So all of us here are the existing brain trust from the Department of Ed, so we will do our best to answer your questions. And thank you, Louisa and NCAN, for everything that you all, I mean, this isn't your first go around. You guys have been doing this for such a long time, but you have dug in so much deeper, especially as we are going through this transition. And the department is just extremely grateful. So thank you. And thank you to your state affiliates as well. And you know, I know we all know this, but as you know, the administration is committed to creating access and equity to higher education for all students. And Louisa just laid out sort of the disparities across the country, right? We have this money on the table. We, along with NCAN and others, want to make sure that, you know, the folks who don't get easy access are able to and don't have to worry about the burden of a student loan with this, right? And so to make this happen, the department and the administration took unprecedented steps and overhauled an almost 50-year system, drastically reducing the number of questions and submission time with this new, better FAFSA. But along with changes do come hiccups and barriers. And so I'm sure those who you are working with within your organizations, I'm sure you have many stories, and we've recognized that this is super frustrating. And so we're continuing to take steps to support you all with your work with students and families. And so one of the first steps was back in April, and NCAN was a huge part of this, is our National Week of Action, right? We wanted to galvanize the field. Those organizations, unlike yours, you all are already working around college access and supporting young people. But there are other organizations such as community-based organizations, faith-based organizations that we wanted to really, you know, call to action and charge them with working with higher ed college access organizations as well, because often they are also the trusted messengers in communities, right? And so we were really trying to mobilize more people who weren't typically engaged. And so we amplified efforts. We had over 200 commitments across the country, including, like I said, state access networks. And then most recently, as Louisa mentioned, we launched a multi-million-dollar program, which is being run through ECMC as a part of our broader FAFSA student support strategy. And this is an effort to help school districts, states, nonprofits, public and private organizations, along with state access lists such as FCAN, right? In really boosting your capacity to help increase FAFSA completion. And so generally, the overarching thing is that the fund is about $50 million. And like I noted, it is being implemented by ECMC. And the funding, and ECMC is the third-party entity, is who is receiving the applications, who is going to review the applications, and who is going to make the final decision. So our part from the U.S. Department of Ed is making sure that they have the funding, which are federal dollars, to be able to then push back out to communities. And as what I was about to say is that the funding will be prioritized for those organizations who are currently working on this issue with schools and districts, and also those who may not be, but do have those deep ties to students and families. So really looking for local collaboration so that we can reach more students and families, and also increase capacity and really decrease those barriers that we know students and families are facing. And so some examples that we've put out there, and I'll drop the link in the chat in a second, but is, really encouraging folks to submit or stand up FAFSA submission clinics in collaboration with schools and CDOs, faith-based organizations. You could use this grant funding to provide transportation and other incentives, right? We all know food brings people together, and we need transportation often to get them there. So really, it's a loosely defined application, and we are looking to reach numbers, right? So NCAN is already doing the big media strategy. And so what we're really looking for is to knock on doors, get people to submission clinics, use some funding to pay for some counselors after school over the summer and during weekends, right? To build that capacity. And so that's all I have. We're very excited. We're seeing a lot of movement in applications, and we would love to see more from Florida in terms of applicants so that we can get funding out to you, or ECMC can get funding out to you to support you all.
Thank you so much. We have quite a few. Oh, were you going to shift over to Monica?
No, I was just going to. Go ahead, Monica.
I was actually just going to share one other resource, if I could, which is that we have a new graduation packet that I know that for some folks in Florida, it's still graduation season. I know some graduations have passed, but for folks who are looking for resources, I highly encourage that you check out this Dropbox or this box link. It has all sorts of resources that you can tailor to your locality and to get the word out about FAFSA to your local districts. Additionally, one thing that we've heard again and again in having webinars with folks is just sometimes the students who we're most trying to reach are the least likely to know what FAFSA means. So just really coming out strong at the top with, this is cash for college. This is a scholarship that does not need to be repaid. And that messaging is something that we're hearing again and again really resonates with the families and students we're trying to reach. So I just wanted to add that as well. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Anything else to add from the USDOE team? Awesome. Well, we have quite a few questions. We're being strategic about tiering these questions. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Adriana, who's sort of fielding our back of the house webinar chat, and also the recipient of all of the wonderful questions that were asked with the registration process.
Yes, thank you, Kim. So I'll start with some questions that we have in the chat just to get those. So we have some, Louisa, I think about the data, of course. So I know we went through some of the slides that had the top 5 highest completion rates. So some of these are wondering why some of those states are doing well with completion. Do they have mandatory completion policies? What are some activities that they might be doing that are giving them those high increased numbers?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. And yes, so I believe it's the top 4 out of 5, excluding DC, which we include because NCAN is based there, but some people would argue it's not a state, so it shouldn't be included. But many of those states are universal FAFSA states. And so we definitely recognize that that has played a large role in boosting the completion rates that we've seen. As far as other strategies that have gone well, we know that certain statewide competitions have been useful. Any school districts or schools or community organizations that have, kind of put a little bit of a competitive twist on this. There has been, some of a bump from that. We've seen other events sort of like my fellow panelists here mentioned where programs have offered FAFSA completion nights where they have pizza or they'll provide funding for transit or childcare. Those are all things that we've seen to be useful. We know that in certain states, translators have been helpful to help parents and students fill out the forms. So it's really a variety of different strategies, but I will say definitely the universal FAFSA piece has been, integral in boosting the completion rates there.
And if I could add, Louisa, one thing we've seen is, and you may have mentioned this, but raffles.
Mm-hmm.
And often schools may not have the budget for this, but we've seen community-based organizations like a local United Way who, gives away incentives to the school to utilize as part of the, you submitted your form and here's a prize for you. We also saw there was one school who had a FAFSA casino night, right? So being really creative and sometimes even engaging the young people in ideas as to what would bring out their peers.
Adriana?
Yes, along with that, how do we get students interested in college, FAFSA completion? How do we make sure that they're aware that these resources all are available to them? We know we have the Do the FAFSA campaign going on. What are some other activities that we can be doing and schools can be doing to ensure that they have access to these forms and know that this is something that's available to them?
And I think for us, another layer to that question that we were talking about earlier is that most school districts, their last day is Friday. And in fact, almost all high schools are graduating their seniors by Friday. So for us, we don't have any time in June. And so capturing students, I guess graduates, in the summer months becomes even trickier. And so we just wanted to add that little wrinkle for some of our southern districts that end before Memorial Day.
Yeah, we definitely have heard this, and we know it's true, not just for Florida, but for many of the southern states. And I think certainly I think this is one of our goals with the Do the FAFSA campaign. We want to make sure that we're reaching students when they're out of school. So that's why we're taking more of an unconventional route, looking at TikTok, maybe for the first time ever in NCAN history, as far as I know. TikTok, Snapchat, Twitch, really trying to meet students where they're at and get them this information and remind them that this is a really critical, element of their post-secondary pathways. But I would also, encourage students to or programs, excuse me, to think about how funding might be useful for summer support as well.
Great. Monica?
I was just going to say, in thinking about summer support, some of the other ideas we've heard are really around engaging local public libraries can be really effective. And then just thinking about where students are in the summer. So shopping malls, amusement parks, if there's a community concert series, that's another idea I heard from a mayor on a call the other day. So just trying to put your head into where students are in the summer is kind of where we're seeing some effective planning there.
Thank you. We do have quite a few process questions about the ECMC application, and we can try to answer those by typing answers as the panelists, and then those that we're not able to answer, we'll do our best to get those captured in any follow-up from today.
Yeah, I think I've answered most of them, Kim.
Awesome. You're doing an awesome job, and I can see when you're typing your answer, so I know that you're wearing several brains right now. And that's really helpful to folks to get those answers, making sure that they're submitting achievable, but also ambitious and stretch goals as they look at their strategies for the summer. We also had quite a few questions come in about technical issues with the FAFSA and specific examples and scenarios. And so those are also appearing in some of the Q&A. Adriana, do you want to take us to the next question?
Yes. So along with that, with FAFSA completion and the students that we're targeting, what are some students that we should focus on? Some people are wondering what programs they should do to focus on which types of students. We know the FAFSA has changed this year, so really ways to find those students that they should be targeting and kind of the options that are outlined for those students to know that, again, that this is something that they could take advantage of. So what specific areas, in a sense, is what our attendees are wondering that they should kind of look out for their students?
Adriana, in terms of student population?
Yes.
Okay, so I know one of our top priorities right now is those with non-SSN parents. So really, and I know we are even for the funding for ECMC, I know that they're also really looking at, I think there's about 250,000 maybe applications that are haven't been completed as a result. And so really targeting the non-SSN parents and students is one.
Does that mean that they're sort of sitting there and they just haven't hit the submit button?
Yeah. And they may have hit it, but then there's some follow-up and whatnot that needs to happen. So
as the FAFSA Army, FAFSA navigators, what can local people do who maybe have that trusted relationship with that family or that student to get them through that last step?
I think sitting down with them, I mean, and I'm unfortunately not the FAFSA Army on the ground, but I think using the trusted relationship to have them, work with them. And then also, and Monica, please jump in, but also call our FSA hotline, which is now under 10 minutes, I'm happy to say, in terms of waiting time to, help get walk through. And we're also going to be launching some more supports, not resources for the field, but sort of technical assistance around the non-SSN in the next few weeks as well. So very shortly.
There's also a live chat feature on the website, which we've been hearing increasingly positive results about. So perhaps if folks tried that previously, it's worth trying again now. If they didn't have the best experience a few months ago, would encourage folks to try that again. And additionally, with the question, I wasn't sure also if they were looking at where exactly to target some of the outreach, but I would say one area, particularly in the summer, also is churches. Is a great place where you can have that environment of trusted adults and a an environment where you can really have that trust and patience. Additionally, boys and girls clubs, YMCAs. Sheethel, what are some other orgs that might be?
Yeah, I mean, any after school and summer learning programs that we've been sort of, that have the YMCA, as Monica mentioned, but also those small community-based out of school time programs that are, you know, the culturally relevant out of school time programs and community-based organizations. I think in addition to the church is how do you partner locally with those, especially when we're looking at multilingual families. Spanish.
Also just add, you know, there might be opportunities to start partnering with post-secondary institutions that are doing some early kind of like summer outreach programming, bridge programming work. This is part of their work too. So there might be opportunities to reach out to the post-secondary folks and see if we can do some partnerships as well.
Those are all fantastic responses. I can almost see the crowd nodding their head and writing that down. Some of the ticky-tacky questions about the application, are we okay to dive into some of those, or do you prefer to just sort of address those as they come through? And then also some back-end FAFSA data numbers. I don't know, Louisa, if you have answers to some of these, like how do you access FAFSA completion status for TRIO, talent search students, some discrepancies on how student enrollments are captured versus what they're seeing locally as enrollment in their districts, because they want to make sure that their gap is accurate and that they're closing it and they can see some progress. So probably some of those types of questions. Are you feeling like you want to answer?
I can do my
This is
best.
a savvy webinar group.
I can do my best. I can also bring these back to Bill and he can give you his suggestions. But I would say for the most part, for data sharing beyond you know, reviewing the data that's on the site, many of our NCAN members have agreements with the either state agency that receives the completion data or with another agency. They're designated entities, and nonprofits, I believe, in general, should have access to this. I know there were some hiccups with data sharing earlier in this cycle that have been resolved, and I think that's been really helpful for a lot of our members. I'm not sure specifically for TRIO programs what that process looks like. So I can check in there, or I'm not sure if Monica or Sheethel, you have some insight to that end. And then the second question was about discrepancies in enrollment. Is that right? That is possibly just a little bit of a lag. It's likely that more local data is you know, is relevant for this year, and maybe there are some folks who haven't quite been added or accounted for. I'll take that to Bill, or I can pass it to others on this panel as well.
And Monica just dropped some resources in the chat on finding district data. And like you said, it might be a discrepancy between like spring enrollment counts and
Right.
what's in the system.
Fall, or yeah, right.
Awesome. Adriana, are we ready for our next couple? I feel like we're grilling you a little bit with the way that the webinars are set up, where folks have to chat and aren't allowed to unmute themselves and ask you directly. So apologies if this sounds like you're in the hot seat or something. And we can definitely punt questions that are hard to answer live to a follow-up communication to make sure we get good answers for everybody. But are there any other questions about FAFSA strategies or this funding opportunity that is not process related that have come through, Adriana?
Yeah, I think we're getting to most of them. I guess another one that comes through from attendees is just kind of the resources that they can use, whether it's for students or families that they can kind of use to complete the FAFSA. Louisa, I know you mentioned to do the FAFSA campaign, so that's going to kind of create that to spread awareness on that. But what are some, whether it's handouts or resources that communities can kind of be giving to these students and parents on completing the form, what the steps may look like, so then they can kind of take that and make sure that they have the steps to do that as well.
And Adriana, I just dropped in our most up-to-date information on the, I'm sorry, no, I lost it, Monica. It's I'll drop it in again. It's for the contributor
It's there, Sheila.
SSN stuff. Oh, sorry, Monica. There's just so much happening in the chat. Lots of links. So yeah, so I dropped that in the chat, I think, rather than have me read over it. If folks have questions after, we're happy to field them.
Awesome. You're doing heroes work, answering 11 questions, 9 still open. If any are able to be answered, we'll do our best live, and then can also work on those follow-ups. And it sounds like lots of our Florida communities on the call do intend to apply for this funding through the ECMC application. I know anecdotally that a few have already from Florida this week. Yes, I'm seeing some head nods, so that's awesome. We do have an active network of local college access networks. We have 18 across Florida. They represent 85% of our state population, which is nearing 23 million. So this has the potential to really close some of those gaps that we saw earlier from Louisa. And I know everyone's just hungry for what works and good summer strategies, given our dilemma of schools being closed this week. And how do we capture those students? I think your ideas of partnering with community is where the action needs to be. Maybe also some media partners using these toolkits and also getting some hits on stories and blasting that out. Is that also an eligible expense?
Yes.
Okay.
I will say though, just because there is, really NCAN is doing so much media that we're really hoping folks will reuse, their media along with some of the stuff that the departments put out and really focus in on those in-person events and getting folks to submit.
And as you said earlier, it really is that grunt work, one-on-one navigation, getting that completion successfully submitted. And like, there's no shortcut to that. You've got to get it successfully submitted.
Yeah.
And
Another idea, Kim, that was brought up in terms of reaching students and families where they are is local theaters, movie theaters. And, apparently local movie theaters make decisions on the trailers and ads that they put on locally. It's not a national or state thing. So if anyone has connections with their local manager at the theater, that's another place where you could, whether it's a QR code or a website link or just a testimonial of a young person within your community that has submitted it, a video, to get up there.
wow, that is a fantastic idea. And thank you, Dave, for submitting. We just had our summit 2 weeks ago, as we saw many of you in person, and our Director of Research and Policy just posted one of the presentations that is full of tips for schools seeking student level FAFSA completion data. And he is also, I know, on hand to help answer some data questions as follow-up. How about just one more question, Adriana, and then we can sort of powwow together and get some of these other, maybe like an FAQ response to some of these other ECMC application questions.
Yeah, that works. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them and then we can answer them later as well. But I guess one last thing, also a lot of questions about the data and then just wondering where communities and districts can kind of access this. So I know, Lisa, you mentioned NCAN's tracker. What are some other things that they can kind of access through your tracker? I know you said that there's so much data in there that you can't get through it all in one webinar, but what are some other things that they can kind of take advantage of there? And FCAN also has our own FAFSA dashboard. So if you're interested in that, we can put the link in our chat too, but just a few highlights on NCAN's tracker as well.
Sure. Yeah, so the tracker is built using the high school level completion data provided by the Department of Education. So this is all publicly available. And if you have the capacity and interest like FCAN, you could download it and, put together your own dashboard. However, I will say that Bill has done a really phenomenal job with the NCAN tracker. It's something that folks have used and found to be really helpful across the country. And we try to disaggregate the data in a number of different ways. So national and then state, as I presented. We also do by school district and by high school. So you can see all of the same trends that I presented, just in a more granular, on a more detailed level. We also break down, let me see, by, I believe, by low income status, by race, I believe, and by geographic location, so rural versus urban. Another one just popped into my head and I'm forgetting it. But I think it was Kim or one of the great FCAN team members dropped the link to the tracker in the chat. So I would really encourage you to check it out, to reach out if you have any questions. Looking at the bar along the top, that's where you'll see all of the different views. It's a Tableau dashboard. It's pretty user-friendly. But if you do have any questions or any suggestions, especially, please do let us know.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes. And I will also include all of these links. Every single link shared will be in the follow-up blog and the key takeaways that we'll be working on today, and hopefully getting that back out to you within the next 24 hours, along with the recording and all of the other information that went into this webinar. So you'll have the whole package coming to you. And we just wanted to probably bring this to a wrap. We still have 7 open questions that we'll do our best to tackle offline, and also type up answers to those 18 questions and sort of package this all together for you. But we did have just 2 last closing sort of ticky-tacky questions. One is there a deadline for the ECMC application, and when do the funds have to be spent by?
Sorry, there is no deadline. It's a rolling first come, first served basis, and the funds need to be spent by September.
September 1?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but ECMC, once the application, once they get into communication with ECMC, they'll clarify for sure. But yeah.
Anything to add, Monica? I didn't want to jump over you.
I was just going to say thank you so much for bringing everybody together. It's amazing that you got over 100 people in 48 hours and these questions. As you said, just like, please do follow up with us on email for anything we can do to get answers to every last one of these, because we're really committed to making sure every single question gets answered, and just really helping to make this as smooth a process as possible from here on out. So again, just this was just a great, I thought, webinar that you all planned. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here and say something similar. Just like, thank you for the great work that's taking place in Florida. We've, tried to highlight some great activities, some great work that's happening there. Partnering with Florida Can has been a great experience. So just, you know how to get a hold of us and the resources that we're able to share. We're here to support you and what you need. And we definitely want to get those FAFSA numbers up. So thank you so much.
Thank you. As you know, for 8 years in a row, Florida has been the #1 state for higher education. As you see from the turnout today, we're serious. We want to stay #1, and this is the FAFSA Army that's on the call. And I know they're going to take this to heart back to their home communities, and we're going to support them as best we can as a collective. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to get off a little bit early so that we can get to work and get busy answering all your questions that we didn't get a chance to, but also professional answers to the ones that we were able to answer live. We really appreciate your dedication, your passion as we head into Memorial Weekend and kick off the summer. So cheers to a FAFSA reboot and powering up completion rates as we head into summer 2024. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.